Hey everyone, it's Mick Lebinskas from Climate Salad. We've got a webinar on today about helping to scale your business globally. Warren and I, we must have met as teenagers. It was so long ago, Warren.
That's a long
But
time.
long time ago, back when the internet was still done with ones and zeros. Yeah, Warren's someone that I've seen work with a number of companies globally, or yeah, definitely from Australia globally as well. We had a chat earlier this year. He's been increasingly doing more and more work with climate-focused companies. And we thought it was a really good time based on the mixed up, crazy world we're in, but also this. I think we're at this junction where these Australian companies are ready to really, really take off. So I thought we'd bring Warren in. Um, Before we go, I would like to make an acknowledgement of country, and I'm here in Gadigal land as part of the Eora Nation, and would like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I always think that there's tons to learn from a culture that lived sustainably with the land for tens of thousands of years. So, with that in mind, I'll throw it over to Warren. Warren's going to run through some content. We've got, we really wanted to focus on founders here, so we'll hopefully have a nice time at the end to really share some questions. But I'll pass it over to Warren.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mick. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Can see you good. Yep.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, by way of context, a little bit more about my background. So I've worked for more than 20 years plus. I think it's fair to say commercializing and scaling high growth technology companies. I've operated as a CEO and founder, so very much sat in your shoes. Have gone on the journey as an operator, running businesses, going through international expansion, and applying best practice approaches in doing that on a number of occasions. And more recently, really taking that experience and working as a growth advisor, go-to-market strategist, in supporting a portfolio of companies around some of those experiences. And in particular, last year, I did some work as a growth strategist working with AWS on their passport program, really supporting their hyper growth ISV segment. So businesses from $50 million up to into the billions in terms of their international expansion programs, applying best practices and doing that with both Australian companies looking to go global, but also a number of US-based companies from Japan looking to enter into APAC. So very much looking forward to sharing some of my insights today. Best practice approaches in navigating some of the complexities of international expansion to drive sustainable growth. So scaling internationally is certainly one of the most exciting and albeit risky moves a high growth tech company can make. Certainly a sign that you've nailed your domestic market, your HQ market, most likely having achieved product market fit in that particular market, but stepping into a new one, that is actually a completely different ball game. Many founders assume they can copy paste their success in a domestic market into another region. And I've seen this happen many times. Some of the pitfalls around that, only to find themselves battling slower growth, misaligned messaging and positioning in that market, and cultural misalignment that overall stalls momentum. So how do you expand overseas without burning through significant amounts of cash, without getting traction, stalling growth? At the same time, international expansion does represent a strategic leap and opportunity for a lot of companies towards unlocking greater market share, revenue streams, brand recognition globally. But navigating the complexities of new market does require a meticulous approach informed by insights and best practices. And I think if there's one takeaway from some of my perspectives today, it will be just the importance of careful, meticulous planning and a deep understanding of the markets that you're looking to enter into to then inform your execution plan. Before we jump into some of the best practice approaches to support expansion, I thought it would be good to spend a little bit of time looking at the current state of funding in the climate tech space, given the critical need for capital to support global expansion. And especially, a lot of my background over the years has been in supporting software, but certainly the importance of being able to provide sufficient capital at the right times as it relates to capital intensive requirements, supporting hardware and infrastructure relevant to the climate tech environment. Without doubt, last year was tough for many founders. We saw firsthand how funding has tightened, valuations have adjusted, and investor caution set in. And a lot of the insights here have been provided through a reference here, 2024 Cut Through Ventures report. If you haven't seen that, certainly worth a look at in terms of the overall funding environment, but specifically around climate tech. There's some really good insights there. What I think we've observed in 24 and moving through to 25 is that momentum is returning. Funding's up from 11% from 2023. Early stage deals are bigger, albeit more competitive. And climate tech and deep tech investment is gaining momentum. So $609 million went into climate tech last year, making it the number 2 most funded sector behind fintech last year. There were 55 deals in climate and clean tech, securing the top deal spot for the second consecutive year. And some strong raises, as I've featured here, with a number of raises over $50 million in 2024. This includes Hysata, that actually has raised 172 million, but more than 225 million in recent times. And it was pretty interesting at one of the talks that I participated in at Climate Week this week, their head of strategy claiming that, albeit that is a good amount of investment, it's probably not enough, just in terms of given the capital intensive nature of investment required, and also saying that their competitors are raising more than double the funding, and most of that is supported by government sources. So I think certainly some good amounts of funding reflected here, but also a general consensus that a lot of companies, especially supporting hardware and infrastructure, there is a need for additional funding and other sources of data, blended capital, government backing that is really required to boost the market moving forward.
Just stepping in, Warren, really quickly, a quick comment on that is that I think nearly 90% of the capital went to a very small amount of deals, and still, to your point, like climate versus fintech and enterprise software, like 235 million just for software. Climate needs like 10 times the money. So it's a pretty good outcome in a down year. But there was a lot of companies in the middle, like seed rounds were pretty good, big rounds were pretty good. Everything in the middle just like totally was pretty crappy. But again, staying optimistic for this year and on forwards. But they're good points to recognise.
Yeah, and what's also very clear is the climate tech market is maturing, good growth in capital, but I think a really consistent message around and strong focus on the importance of driving commercial confidence, adoption, supporting strong business fundamentals, as well as focusing on climate rationale, and that's really important in terms of building confidence with investors moving forward. So to your point, Mick, strong funding at early stage, but a significant funding gap as it relates to growing from early stage to scaling, what's known as the missing middle, addressing the valley of death growth phases, from early pilots and product development concepts to product market fit, then market validation and global scale. And despite the influx of other sources that are coming through from private equity and infrastructure funds, that there is still a pretty significant gap in funding to bridge that gap from early stage into scaling, especially with breakthrough tech. So what's capital looking like in 2025? Again, I'm kind of pulling on some of the insights from the Cut Through Ventures report, and also from KPMG High Growth Ventures. 2025 is the year of deployment, and not just from a deployment in terms of implementation, but also capital deployment. As the market's maturing, there's certainly a sense there is plenty of dry powder. So Kristin at Vericent Ventures, one of the partners there, is certainly claiming there that the amount of dry powder earmarked for climate tech stands at $86 billion globally, held by climate investors and government-led funding. But it's clear also that for 2025, for founders, it's not about waiting for the market to improve. It's about how you need to be thinking about and positioning yourself for success right now, and clearly demonstrating clear commercial pathways. So again, very clear in terms of what investors are looking for as it relates to key focus areas in 2025, and important areas to demonstrate as you look to source more capital for expansion. So some of those key points: demonstrating strong market validation. Investors are certainly being more selective, more cautious, and at the same time looking for clear signs of commercial traction and adoption. Efficient growth, sustainability, and capital efficiency really matter more than ever, and I think that's relevant to the market overall. Engaging global investors early. The best opportunities for scale will come from international capital. In fact, 57% of Australian deals last year had overseas participation, especially relevant to later stage rounds. But it's also important that those investors are looking to see some level of Australian investor participation, quite often leading the round. So don't overlook the importance of both investor engagement here, but also getting engaged early with global funds. Leveraging AI and deep tech integration. Again, so I've referenced here Alan Waters from HSBC. He was on a panel this week. He'd literally flown in from the US that morning, and pretty much stated that every conversation that he'd had over the previous week in the US had been around AI and agentic. It's the hot topic. So even if you're not building AI first, integrating and thinking about emerging tech, deep tech or AI can really boost attractiveness from a capital perspective. And probably the last point: be ready for longer due diligence. Investors are taking their time, so ensure you're really prepared heading into those conversations. Clean, robust data room, solid financial modeling, data-backed metrics that you can speak to are key. And I think therefore having a really clear strategic plan and go to market for entering into new markets will really help build confidence around the commercial pathways that will lead to that investment. And just to kind of finish off on some of the other quotes here, really pretty consistent messaging from investors, from Wallamai Capital. Effective climate solutions with clear commercial pathways, capital's ready and waiting and bridging the scaling growth phase. And back to Alan from HSBC, solutions that are cost competitive, scalable, and backed by real demand will be at the front of the queue for funding. So a very consistent message there. The importance of really being able to demonstrate, as you're thinking about global expansion, demonstrating clear commercial pathways that will attract capital moving forward. So where to focus in 2025? And I've stolen a bunch of your content here, Mick. If you haven't seen it, Mick sent a really great email last week, really talking about the importance of international growth, where to focus. Look, Australia's producing some incredible climate solutions, world of opportunity to grow them with full impact potential. But which markets do you look to target first? It's not an easy decision. And going back to a lot of my experiences around software used to be that from Australia, that the default global day one step for software companies would be, right, let's go to the US. Let's go into English speaking markets like UK, potentially even Singapore, as an entry point into APAC. That's not the case for climate tech. There's no real simple or perfect answer. But I think what Mick shared last week has really demonstrated some really good considerations for every business in terms of some of the key macro indicators that are critical to understanding in each market. There's a whole series of factors across these markets, and I won't go into each of these because the email details those. But the importance of regulation, customer adoption in these markets relevant to your particular product and industry, what the sales cycles are, they can vastly differ from market to market. The specific market dynamics, types of customers and partners, policy, the capital required to enter into certain markets will be vastly different. Of course, the uncertainty caused by geopolitical factors, especially with the US right now, and also where each market is in terms of their focus on climate policy and the importance of delivering economic value. And again, that talks to the importance of demonstrating commercial traction in your planning as you look to expand. So what this really emphasizes is navigating the complexities of new markets really requires a strong, meticulous approach that's informed by strong insights, best practices that can de-risk your market entry, and so you can navigate these markets with confidence. So given these market opportunities, the funding landscape, I want to just spend a little bit of time focusing on some of the key approaches, best practice areas that I believe are important to support international expansion. Certainly an approach that I've used advising businesses, but also in businesses that I've been a CEO or founder of. And it really focuses once again on a really structured, data-driven approach to support your expansion plans, maximize opportunities, and mitigate risks in doing that. So market validation.
Sorry, Warren, are you okay with questions as we go?
Sure.
Just on the screen back, in terms of localized knowledge, so there's obviously a lot you can do remotely, and we ran international trade missions.
Yeah.
That localized knowledge, is it through partners? And if it is through partners, like how do you go about like because people are sometimes pitching to you and selling you like, yeah, I know absolutely everything and solve all your problems. Like, how do you get that? How do you get that localized knowledge?
Yeah, I'm going to go into a little
Oh,
bit more
cool.
detail in each of these because
Oh, good, good, good. Okay, keep
yeah,
going. I've interrupted. Yeah,
yeah, because localization is absolutely critical, as
yeah,
you
got
said.
it. Cool.
So validating market opportunities is really crucial for successful expansion. This involves understanding the needs of customers, your competitors in each of those markets, the cultural and regulatory landscape, and testing demand through pilots and partnerships. A thorough validation process really ensures that your product is solving a critical problem in the new market. You know, does your product solve a pressing problem in the US, for example? Is it a top priority for potential buyers? Are customers actively looking or paying for similar solutions? Who are your competitors and how deeply entrenched are they? So that market validation and approach is pretty critical. And that really starts with what I call the doing your homework phase. And one, I can say I've seen so many companies fail to invest in and at some significant cost for not doing so. Doing your homework, doing market intelligence. And here are a few areas that you really want to focus on in that research and intelligence phase. So conducting research to validate market demand, what's the potential market size and opportunity. This is really where you're doing your TAM work, the SOM and SAM. So what is the obtainable market size for your particular product in a given market? Analyzing market insights, what might be the potential barriers to entry from a technology, regulation, policy, risk perspective, identifying potential strategic partners and service providers that can support market entry is super important. Then being able to assess your product's adaptability for the new market, getting feedback from local customers to refine your offering, confirming product market fit then through testing and pilot programs, and then really identifying commercial opportunities through customer discovery is critical. You know, my approach has always been to through go-to-market strategies to have a very customer-led approach to really understanding what your proposition is and connecting and engaging with customers in terms of the problems that you're solving for in market. So identifying target customers, getting super focused and narrow around who your customer profiles are, your ICP. That allows you then to really understand and define what your unique value proposition is in each market. And that then lends itself to being able to build your go-to-market strategy and execute on that. So being able to refine your messaging, positioning, and really then articulating where you're going to differentiate and what your winning strategy is with a clear customer-led strategy. On the back of the research conducted, how do you then de-risk market entry and navigate the complexities of the market with confidence? And again, I think this, as it relates to the climate tech industry, super important in terms of where there is a real requirement for a lot of capital to support international expansion. How can you be as capital efficient in your approaches, especially when you're entering into markets early on, build confidence and build traction through de-risking strategies. That starts with tailoring your go-to-market, developing a customized go-to-market plan that outlines the key steps for successful market entry from launch through to growth. Localization is key. I've seen a lot of companies think about localization and think, well, that's probably just localizing marketing, or if it's in foreign language, localizing a website or language. You need to think about localization across your entire business. Understanding there are local nuances to each particular market and the impacts that has on your entry strategy. What does that look like from a product, pricing, partnerships perspective? When is the right time to hire local teams and local expansion operators in supporting that go-to-market entry? So using an example, the US as a market where I've supported technology companies on a number of occasions. The US market has very distinct buyer expectations, legal frameworks, cultural nuances. So having the right talent on the ground is pretty key. Working with local expansion operators, professionals who really understand the region and country's sales cycles and business culture. Building a US leadership team early to ensure credibility and operational efficiency. But at the same time, don't underestimate the importance of founders needing to support that market. So that's a delicate balance. I've seen many examples of companies enter into a US market that they've hired locally. They haven't necessarily supported those local teams early on from a founder and executive perspective. And those businesses tend to fail. The ones that do well in the US are those that are committed to that market, and the founders will spend a good amount of time really supporting the local market, hiring the local teams, finding the local expertise and partners, and really being able to bridge the cultural gap between HQ and into that new market. So partnering with experts, I think that's hopefully answering some of your question, Mick, just around the importance of localization, partnering with experts locally, whether that's recruitment, go-to-market execution, legal compliance, to avoid a lot of the common pitfalls associated with entering into those new markets. Building awareness, also super important. You may be well known in the Australian market, but it's probably not the case in other markets. So building brand presence and awareness, market entry, launch plans, what are the events that make sense to be able to be at and be supported at? What is the content that goes alongside that is localized for that market? The importance of strategic partnerships and alliances, founder roadshows. So if as founders you can't spend permanent time in market, then how do you ensure that as founders and executives you're representing the company at key events and at roadshows can be highly effective. And then executing in market, developing a localized sales marketing approach that de-risks market entry, identifying local potential partners, alliances, and on the ground execution and support. And while this approach can be driven by a number of different sales and go-to-market motions, I actually thought it'd be good to focus on the importance of partnerships in de-risking market entry. I've seen this work, particularly well and effectively with a number of companies, but again, in alignment with the climate tech industry, the requirement for significant amounts of capital. How do you ensure that you're de-risking entry and being able to do that with a good degree of capital efficiency? And I think partnerships is a key component of doing that. So thinking about developing a partnership ecosystem can be highly effective in de-risking the entry, understanding your local market needs, and can act as a force multiplier to accelerate growth. Partnerships provide access within the market, can help you build credibility through association with those well-known local or global partners, and also downstream integration opportunities. And those collaborations can also, with technology companies and service providers, really help you amplify reach, deployment and implementation at scale, give you access to global customers and sales channels. And I think there's some really interesting opportunities, again, from an efficiency point of view, to form strategic alliances, high impact collaborations that can extend your capabilities in that local market, from a co-selling and distribution perspective, co-marketing, through to joint ventures, and even co-development of solutions. And that really lends itself to driving commercial adoption and scaling more quickly, with resellers or channel distributors, where those existing relationships and localization efforts directly exist. They already exist in market. So really, I think a partnership-led approach can be a really effective way in driving and de-risking market entry and supporting capital efficiency. And finally, once you've worked through done your homework around the market, the research and intelligence, your go-to-market strategy, how do you de-risk that entry? There's some fundamental things that are important to have around operational alignment, financial readiness, so really robust financial planning, risk management, budget and cash flow analysis, assessing the risk factors in each of the markets. So if we go back to the sequencing and prioritization of markets, then really understanding not only from a macro perspective what is right fit for your business, but also in terms of the financial implications of entering into that market. Legal and compliance, obviously very key. Understanding local compliance, regulatory landscape, and in particular areas that are going to be specific to your industry. So making sure that you've got the right local expertise to support you around those areas. Operational readiness. Are you ready as an HQ to be able to support the operational scale, ensuring that there is a seamless market entry? Evaluating supply chain, local distribution partners, tech infrastructure, ensuring that you're able to support expansion through scalable processes, with clearly aligned objectives between HQ and the local team in the expansion markets. And then building a scalable culture, a well-aligned team with strong local talent, identify the critical roles that you need to hire in market, and investing in the right leadership team for scale, what the org design needs to look like to support that in each market, and your overall capability requirements for the local market. And really just to, how do you then take those learnings and really make that a repeatable process? Now, what I would say is that every market that you enter into, you need to go through the same level of due diligence, understanding the local market nuances. But scaling isn't just about entering one market, it's about making that expansion repeatable. So how do you take the learnings from entry into an initial given market and really turn that into a market entry playbook? So where you're capturing and validating learnings in the term of a playbook from those initial market entries, designing metrics to track market success, where you can iterate quickly, and really that focus on continuous improvement and learning and adaptability for each of the markets that you're going into. Making sure that with that approach, you're tailoring your go-to-market strategies for each region, again, based on the nuances and differences in each of those markets. And that really helps you inform the right level of sequencing and prioritization. And then it comes down to the local market execution, effective hiring plans for leadership, sales, local operation teams, revenue models that reflect local pricing and what might be very different buyer behavior expectations. So again, important to have a structured approach that is repeatable and scalable as you look at expanding into multiple markets. And I wanted to just really finish off on when you think about market entry strategies, it's going to be very specific to your business when you've gone through the intelligence and research process, what makes sense in terms of selection of market, but also some of the strategies that we're seeing within the space. There is no one size fits all. Australian climate tech businesses are expanding into international markets through a variety of different strategies, such as joint ventures, partnerships, licensing agreements, as well as direct investments. No one size fits all. It's going to be very specific to your business, but you can see here, I think some good examples. Vivo Power, very much founded in 2014, has shifted from AU to a really strong global presence. Their HQ is now in the UK. They IPO'd and have acquired, critical businesses along their journey, as well as making significant direct investments. Lone Bio are very much focused on technology transfer and licensing agreements to deploy in international markets, particularly in developing regions. FFI, Fortitude Future Industries, really have used a number of different approaches and strategies: joint ventures, strategic partnerships, direct investments in markets like Argentina and Kenya. So a very multi-pronged approach from their perspective. And a couple of the companies that I mentioned earlier in the presentation that have done funding, Hysata and Nera, a company that I actually worked with through the AWS Passport program last year, having secured funding and looking at their international expansion plans, have very much focused on the importance of formulating strategic partnerships to de-risk and enter into those markets. And really just some key takeaways. I've talked about a lot of these things, but adopting a founder-led approach as you're entering into certain markets, and then balancing that with what is the right time then to be hiring locally and hiring leadership in each of those markets. Really understand your expansion drivers. It's not just about revenue growth, but market opportunity, product market fit validation, prioritizing markets with the right and necessary insights, markets with strong ecosystems, networks, talent, and customer density are important considerations. Strategic execution is key. I think pretty clear from the content that we've discussed today, that the importance of really researching, understanding the local markets that you're engaging with. So research, adaptability, and local engagement really drive success. No one size fits all. Data's key. Partnerships locally and globally can be an absolute game changer in de-risking market entry and supporting capital efficiency, and really being able to track the key metrics that support your expansion plans moving forward. And finally, just de-risking expansion. Leverage experts in each of the local markets or locally, people that have gone on the journey, that can really help you with the insights and proving frameworks to help you accelerate growth as you look at international expansion. What I just finished with here, we talked about capital earlier, and this is really, I think, just only a small lens on tech support programs. Client Salad, of course, is one of those, but there are a number of tech support programs that are really compelling to support early stage businesses. And Energy Lab, I know, has its own international boot camp. So again, some great resources there, as well as supporting capital, but also in terms of as you're thinking about international expansion in each of the markets, where there are companies within the Australian market that can really support that approach. And that concludes the presentation. So I'd love to take any questions from anyone.
Yeah. Please feel free to unmute or use the actual raise your hand or the raise your hand button. And if not, I've got one. Jeff?
Yeah. Thanks, Mick. Thanks, Warren. So you touch on going into each market and looking at each market and working out what's different about them. I'm just wondering about your thoughts on partnering with multinational companies that are already in those markets if you've got a product that complements their offering.
Yeah, look, I think absolutely. I think that is a strong way to support market entry. If you're aligning to a particular corporate that has strong credibility within that marketplace, then I think that can be a highly effective way in terms of building traction. Yeah.
Thanks.
Lee.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Warren. That was lots of food for thought. Plenty of things to think about, and particularly as a bootstrapper. Every time you use the word team, I'm thinking, oh, dollars.
Yeah.
But I think taking away from what you presented, particularly for a bootstrapped company, looking at things like partnerships and resellers might be the best entry point into a new country.
Yeah.
Particularly when you go into new countries, all the legal and accounting and all those issues as well. Do you have any hints and tips for how to approach that for a young bootstrapping company?
Yeah, look, I think it really comes down to being able to connect into local expertise, within those markets. So certainly, I think there are people locally within Australia with experiences of expanding into markets. So growth consultancies, some of the support programs that I talked about earlier, government related resourcing that I think can help you from within the context of Australia and help you shape some of those approaches. But as it relates to if there's a particular market on the back of that process that you really think, yeah, this is the market that we want to go deeper on, then I think it comes down to, again, finding some people locally that really understand the nuances of that particular market, can introduce you into customers potentially early on. And again, there are, when I've entered into other markets, there are partners that, in particular, for example, that I work with. So I might support businesses from a strategy point of view in Australia, but have local experts from a go-to-market that reside in markets like the US, UK, or APAC that can help you with the localization piece.
No worries. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Just my add on to that, Warren, before we go to Debbie. I see a lot of companies go to partners too early.
Yep.
And it was the question I was going to go to Warren with is we had two paths talked about in this presentation. One is nail it in Australia, then take it in the US with the advantage of at least you've been able to do it localized and close to you and you know this market better. But the reality that a big international market will never ever be the same, and I think at best I've ever seen is probably 50% the same. So it's always new work, and then the other model is go early overseas, go straight away overseas and skip Australia. I know a lot of Australian climate tech companies have had to do that just because there's just no market for them. Some of them have, and some haven't. Really, really different opportunities, but I think also to the other point Warren raised is thinking that you're just going to hire a salesperson or get a partner to solve product market fit for you. I think is probably the biggest fallacy. Like product market fit, I've never ever seen achieved without massive founder force. So yeah, I think having you're having a great product even in Australia, and then being like, great, I've got an overseas partner, I'm all done, is probably the big danger. Partners are a great way to scale.
Yeah.
So on that side of it, I think, but scale an existing product market fit product. So that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think it's almost, the way I think about it, the work that you did in order to establish initial traction in your domestic market in Australia first. You did that as a founder. You did that as the early executive team in order to establish PM Fit. When you go into a new market, you're going on the same journey again, right? You need to think about it as that. This is albeit you've got the war stories and some traction supporting that, which is helpful, but you need to almost approach it as, right, we're starting from scratch here. I need to be the founder, having the conversations early, and then starting to build and localize and scale through partnerships. So you have to earn product market fit in every single market that you operate in.
Yeah, excellent. Debbie.
Thanks, Mick. That was a perfect lead into what I was going to say as well, that just not necessarily finding the right, like demonstrating it in Australia. The market is just so small. And so we found, sorry, for those who don't know, I've built a couple of nature tech companies, one Wildlife Drones, which actually was, we got pulled over to the US because of the client demand in that market when we were trying to, demonstrate here in Australia. And it's like, well, why not? We'll just do it. And went over there, and our tech is now used in 8 countries. But now for our next product, which is Nature Helm, it's a biodiversity data platform, and it's inherently global. And again, Australian companies are not under the same regulations as what's happening in Europe. And so it's just from day one, there's no point trying to prove yourself in Australia. You can obviously still get clients in Australia, but I don't think Australia is the proof point. The proof point is in the heart of where the market is being driven from. So that's kind of our experience. But I also think that having big partners is really risky for a little business, in that you're such a low priority in all of the things that they're dealing with. And so I've been finding that, finding companies that are get more value, there's mutual values from both sides of an equal proportion, can really help having a more effective partnership. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see how we go with Nature Helm, with not having a direct presence in Europe, but we have got on board a non-executive director who specializes in corporate biodiversity, who's based in France. And so we do have somebody there, but it's not the same as you mentioned, like having the founder on the ground. So we're planning our first trips over there and what have you for clients and partners and all the rest of it. But yeah, thank you for the presentation. That's really insightful.
That's some good comments, Debbie. Yeah, it is really true. Like, no one sells like the founder. I think it's the best way I've ever heard someone describe it is like either getting on an electric scooter or on the travelator at the airports. It's like when it's actually kind of taking off without you doing it, then you can start to think about other partners and salespeople. But the founder effort. It's probably one of the hardest things about climate tech actually is that your software, you can do a lot remote. You can US dollars, you can change your Z's to S's to Z's in your language. You can have a US address. You can do all that in Australia, but for something like hygiene renewables here with Kirsten and others, like that's much harder to fully do that in a big market. So it's definitely a pressure point for Australia because I think almost to the same point in terms of the risk. Like I just don't think you there's just not enough shots on goal here in Australia in terms of big corporates buying these early stage products. But anyway, I think it's definitely case by case. But that's the point is everyone keeps sharing their experiences and hopefully make some progress.
Yeah. I mean, maybe one comment around partners. Certainly understand. I think Mick, you made the point. Partnerships are good for scale. Being top of mind with partners in an overseas market can be a challenge. I think though, if you can find partners where there's potentially a technology integration, where the integration of those technologies is driving additional value for both parties, then and therefore makes you top of mind for that partner in terms of bundling their solution with your technology, then that can be an effective way to really get early access to customers through that integration.
Kirsten. Hey, Kirsten, you got your hand up. Did you want to ask a question or did I? Microphone not working. Okay, we'll get your question. I think Warren, are you okay to share these slides, Warren?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
And Warren's also in Slack, so we'll hopefully get some more interaction coming up. But I think just to build on some of that Warren talked about, I think timing is really critical. And timing is really hard and messy. Certainly in like globally, it feels really extra complex at the moment. But I think there's no doubt that it's very difficult to grow faster than the market. And one thing I learned very painfully is whilst you want to be an innovator and be ahead of the market, it feels good and first mover advantage I thought was a great thing. It's actually significantly more successful to be a fast follower than to be too early. Like it's much harder to you almost can't beat the market. You've got to get the pace right. I think learning about thinking about that market growth and growing with the market and get that timing right is key. There's been, I think, hundreds of companies in climate who have gone too fast and have tried to use hire 20 salespeople just to think they can sell their way through this. And I don't think that's necessarily true. So I think getting the timing of your growth with the market and the complexity of the fact that you're actually looking at an international market is extra tough. But I think that actually the inbound we've had from international investors into Australia in the last 3 months has been so significant that it suggests to me that there is this tremendous opportunity. So it's part of what Climate Sales wants to do is to support everyone on that journey. I'm not sure we're going to be able to do trade missions this year, but now it's actually a bit more just about individual companies going and growing that way too. Well, we've got Kirsten's joining via a second, but her question was for budgeting, what should we expect as costs for setting up a new market? Any thoughts on the range? So let's say you've done all the research, you've picked your market, and like, great, we're going to go and go into this market. What's any thoughts on what we should budget?
Look, hard to put a number on that, quite honestly, without knowing more specifics around the company. So maybe happy to take that offline, maybe to understand the particular technology approach and markets and support that. And there's of course going to be very important nuances between software and hardware and building infrastructure. But I think whichever market, the size of the market, it obviously will drive budget and cost. Although getting super targeted, focused niche around particular, narrowing that ICP as much as possible can be an effective way in controlling budget as well. So probably can't give you a range, but happy to take that offline and think about that specific to the particular business you have.
Just one really quick thing on budget is there's the two big grants that really help Australian companies is the R&D offset, which again is being diluted, can beaten around a bit, but still works. And then there's the Export Marketing Development Grant. So basically, you can get half the money back on research, on consultants, on trade missions. So I think you can actually be pretty thrifty to do the first bit of work to actually get to the market and just visit and either couch surf or stay in cheap hotels. I've stayed in some pretty awful cheap hotels in at San Francisco Airport before. Like you can be pretty cheap to go and actually get basically set up. Like you can have a temporary office that can take your mail, have an address. You can set up even a LLC or a Delaware Corp. Like I think for under $10,000, you can actually be effectively set up in the US. There's a really, really big step of having your first employee. So US certainly, I think, is different to Asia and Europe in terms of like they're very, very easy to have contractors and other things. Whereas you've got to really, really check your local laws on those things. But you can go very light, but then the first step of having an actual team there is really big. You typically have to have full accounting and HR. You got to get health insurance. That can be a big step. And then actually if you're doing an operational plant, like again, the difference between hygiene versus a software business is going to be massively different. So really, really, really varies. But yeah, definitely worth a conversation.
Yep.
Debbie.
Thank you. I'll make it quick because it's time.
Right.
But just you mentioned that there's been a lot of international investment in Australia. Most of our investors to date have been Australian. I'm wondering if you talk about nuances for different markets that you're trying to sell into, but what about nuances for international investors rather than Australian? Is there a difference or something that we need to sort of think about a bit more when looking at international investment?
Hey, Mick, that might be more of a question for you, given the nuances of the actual industry, if that's...
Yeah. So it like Australia, it varies, right? There's a massive difference between an angel investor, a seed fund, an impact fund, a VC who's actually raised. So the good news is that there's 100 times the amount of money and 100 times the amount of investors at each stage. I will say in climate, probably more than any other category, there is very nationalistic capital, and sometimes even like more localized. So you might have city-based funds. So the UK Clean Growth Fund is an amazing team with an amazing fund, but can only invest in UK companies or companies with a UK presence. I would say 95% of American investors will only invest in a Delaware corporation.
Yeah, that's what I found too.
Unless you're crazy good, like Excel investing in Atlassian when they were like doing millions of dollars of profit and like 80% growth, 60% margin, it was like just off the charts. So an ordinary seed, an A and B, like just highly unlikely to get a US investor. Congruent Ventures, I've known Abe York for years. I cannot send him a non-Delaware corporation because he's raised money on the basis of being a Delaware. So the best thing to do is to look at the portfolio companies that they've already invested in. Your best route to any investor is to be like, I look like them, but obviously a little bit different. So it's like that's an international company. They've invested in them. That they look like me, and contact that company and say, hey, we're growing really, really well. How have you found this investor? And they'll either say, horrible, stay away, or they'll say, great, do you want to do an intro? Like chatting through that, it just gets you that alignment, because otherwise they're like, oh, we had to go and set up a Delaware Corp and we had to move the whole operation, the whole team had to move. Like you just learn it through that.
Yeah,
Um,
awesome.
so and there's also, it's getting better, but it's like all the money is to late stage, right? There's $1 trillion sitting up there in at the IPO land or private equity land, like in really, really big checks. Like I met a sovereign wealth fund who was like, "Yep, we look at anything, at the $100 million and up mark." And it's like, great, like Debbie, you want $100 million? That'd be really good. You just need to be a $1 billion company. So, but it does come down. Like they eventually do funds of funds, and it does help the market. So I think there will be a lift over this year. Um, but the main thing again goes to the original question around, if you have, getting a customer in that market. So it's the combination of market and capital. So if you go, hey, if you're going to work your butt off for product market fit, doing it in a bigger market, which is moving faster, has better regulation and more capital, is completely okay.
Yeah.
Like that can be a really good path. But getting capital, thinking that I've got 5 Australian customers, and I'm going to raise money in the US, like it's highly, highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Unless there's like, sometimes in agriculture, like in energy, maybe, but even those industries are so massively different in the US and those other markets that it's just not, it's worth 1%. Like it's just, even full product market fit is really only, it has a tiny bit of exporting. You've got to go and earn it with the customer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
One thing I'll say is that the job of investors is to meet with founders. And if you go to them, most of them, before you want capital and say, hey, I'm building this ambitious business. What I like your feedback on our growth plans, like get on their radar, send them monthly updates. It's not like a single pitch in, well, here you go, here's a check. It's always about well, I'd say 90% of the time it's about a long-term relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks everyone for jumping on. Thanks everyone, and thanks, round of applause to Warren for sharing his insights. Another good thing for the industry is actually that we're getting like lots of people like Warren who are bringing their experience building other businesses into climate tech, and every year we go by, we get more and more expertise. And more than any other industry, we're collaborative and supportive of each other. So everyone keep going, keep supporting. Reach out to Warren and I on Slack or by email, and hopefully we'll keep growing.
Great.
Take it easy, everyone. Talk soon.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ed.